Je suis Malcolm Whittle, le patron de Linka SA, the manufacturers of Elinchrom electronic flash. Since 1962, we've been manufacturing electronic flash, and more than 40 years of listening to our customers has given us the insight and experience to produce what we believe are today the finest units in the world, still built to the highest specification in the best Swiss tradition.
Hello, my name's Chris Burfoot. Welcome to the Elinchrom headquarters here in Switzerland. Studio lighting can be a potential minefield with all this to contend with. But with the help of the world's most advanced studio flash system, I'm going to guide you through it. Traditionally, tungsten or continuous light was always used in studio situations, but these days studio flash systems are more the norm. We're going to start off by looking at the various advantages and disadvantages of both tungsten, continuous light and studio flash systems. Let's start with tungsten. This is the Elinchrom Mini Light, which is a low-powered, fan-cooled continuous light head. The main advantage with continuous tungsten light is of course that they're very inexpensive to buy. When you're setting them up, what you see is what you get. You can see where the shadow areas and where the highlights fall onto your subject. And of course when you're photographing with your camera, you can set it onto automatic, which makes them extremely simple to use. There are, however, several disadvantages when using tungsten light. The colour the light produces is different to daylight, which means that the camera has to be adjusted to compensate. They get very hot, so the range of accessories that can be used are very limited. When you're photographing people, this can cause shiny skin and tiny pupils, which is not very flattering when you're doing a head and shoulder portrait. On-camera flash, the quickest and most convenient artificial light source. But actually, it's the worst possible place you can put a light, causing harsh shadows, red eye, and a multitude of other problems. Studio flash. Let's look at the advantages. Controllable, consistent power, which is daylight balanced. It's got a fast recycling time and a very short flash duration. Studio flash heads also include a tungsten modelling lamp, which shows you just where the light falls on the subject. These advantages, coupled with a huge range of accessories, makes the Elinchrom system unique. This is the front of a Style 400BX flash head with the inner reflector, the modelling lamp and the all-important flash tube. As with all Elinchrom lights, the accessories are attached with a secure and easy-to-use double-locking bayonet system. Okay, so let's have a look at the digital control panel. Firstly, we have the main on-off switch. The digital display indicates the power setting of the flash, 6 being the maximum power on a Style 400. This is then controlled by using the up and down buttons in tenths of an f-stop. This means that if we reduce the power value from 6 to 5, the flash output is reduced by exactly 1 f-stop. This is the main modelling lamp control button. At the moment it's set to proportional. This means that the modelling lamp power varies in proportion to the flash. We can turn it off or we can set it manually. After releasing the button, the display returns to the flash output setting. The slave cell control button enables the unit to be triggered by any external flash source via the light-sensitive receiver. The illuminated LED on the slave button indicates it is switched on. This button controls the flash ready beep. If it drives you mad, you can turn it off. And this is the flash test button. The flash synchronization lead, which connects the flash head to your camera, is plugged in here. This is Laura. Laura's going to be our model today for the DVD, and we're going to start off by taking a couple of shots of Laura with the most commonly used artificial light source, an on-camera flash. Big smile, great. Okay, so we've got the shot, but look at the results. They're pretty disappointing. The harsh black shadow on the background, the flat, unflattering lighting, and even a touch of red eye. It's not what we want to achieve. It's a bit of a snapshot, really. Okay, let's start playing with some lights. It's a good idea to make life even easier for yourself to dim the room lights down so that you can really see what you're going to get. We've seen that by putting a light source at our camera position, the results are pretty awful, but we can improve that very easily by moving our light source to a position at 45 degrees around from the camera and moving our model out from the background. Just look at the difference that lighting's made. No shadow on the background, and we've got a shaded side on Laura's face that shows a three-dimensional effect. This is much better, but is not ideal. Look at the heavy shadows on the side of Laura's face, not tremendously flattering. Remember that when the flash fires, it's a lot brighter than the modelling lamp, therefore the shadows are going to be darker. We could, if we wanted to, add a second light from this side to fill those shadow areas. But even something as simple as a white piece of paper can push enough light in to those shadows to relieve them. A purpose-built reflector panel is a much better option because it's much more efficient. Of course, the important thing with a reflector panel is that it must be positioned correctly. And rather than someone holding it, by fitting it into the special holding arm, it can be pivoted into any angle or position, and then when you're happy with it, it can be locked off. Lighting from below is very unnatural because we're all programmed to see light from above. So the position of our main light should be slightly above our subject's head. When I move the light up, you'll see that it suddenly becomes more natural looking. Now, the basic principles of studio lighting is that the bigger the light source, the softer it gets. If you can imagine how harsh the sunlight is on a day where there's no clouds and there's a clear blue sky, deep shadows, very hard-edged shadows as well. The sun is an immense light source, but it's also 93 million miles away. So in relation to me, it becomes a very small light source. If, however, you go outside on a cloudy day, you've got cloud cover from horizon to horizon, and the whole dome of the sky becomes the light source. A very soft, delicate light with hardly any shadows. Let's make the light softer by fitting an umbrella. When fitting an umbrella, remember to focus it so that the light reaches the edge but doesn't spill over. Silver umbrellas give a high contrast sparkly light. Very good for young people with good smooth skin and used a lot in the glamour industry for those sparkly images. Now let's try a white one. The white umbrella gives a much less contrasty light, much softer and much more natural, and is very suitable for most subjects. And finally, the translucent. The translucent or the shoot-through umbrella, moved in really close, can give the softest light achievable from a brolly. The difference between umbrellas can be quite subtle and is more easily seen on a photograph. Let's compare the results using a silver umbrella on the left and a white on the right. The silver gives a much higher contrast and much more sparkly light. And now look at the difference between a white on the left and a translucent umbrella on the right. Both umbrellas give a much less shiny light, but the translucent is quite a bit softer. The reflector should also be placed at an angle of 45 degrees, so that it reflects light from the main light to this portion of Laura's face and then graduates off as it comes around. Up to now we've had Laura facing the camera position. This isn't very flattering because it makes anyone's shoulders look very wide. But now we have a choice. We can either turn Laura towards the light, or we can turn Laura away from the light. By turning Laura away from the light, we will accentuate her figure because the light is falling across her. So first, let's prepare the camera ready to take some pictures. The main camera control dial should be set to manual. To get the best image quality, I'm going to set my camera to 100 ISO. The shutter speed needs to be set to the flash synchronization speed for the camera. In this case, 125th of a second. If you're shooting digitally, you need to make sure that your white balance is set to automatic, although some photographers may wish to do a custom white balance setting. The only other setting we need to make is the aperture, and we need a flash meter for this. This is the flash meter. It's a vital tool of the trade, and it measures the flash output from your studio heads. The shutter speed is here, and after we've taken a flash reading, the correct aperture will appear here. I've decided that my shooting aperture should be f8, so I'm just going to check to make sure that the light hasn't changed. The sync lead is plugged into the flash meter, and I'm going to take a light reading from the side of Laura's face pointing towards the main light. I fire it, the light gives me f8, and I'm going to set that onto my camera. I just need to replace the reflector into the correct position at 45 degrees, and we're ready to take some pictures. Look at the lighting on Laura, it's absolutely gorgeous. Lovely soft shadows, beautiful modelling and three-dimensionality. But look at the background, it's gone grey. It's a white background, but because we haven't put a light on it, it's not very nice. So let's see what we can do to improve that. This is a simple pop-up background which we can just lean against the wall behind the subject. And just by doing that makes a tremendous difference to the photograph. Just look at the difference. Just by putting a blue background in behind her, we get a much more professional looking shot. Let's recap on the position of the equipment. Firstly, the main light is set slightly higher than Laura's head and at a position of 45 degrees around from the camera. The distance between the front of the umbrella and Laura is about 1 metre, and it gave a flash reading of f8. Secondly, the reflector panel is placed in a similar position on the other side to fill those shadows. All we did was to add the background. Let's look at some examples taken with this simple setup. When you're adding a second light to a studio setup, it's often better, rather than use it as a fill light, which we'll cover later, use it as an effects light. This can give extra depth to your photograph and help to separate your model from the background. One of the best accessories to use for this is the snoot. When it came to filling the shadows, we had the choice of either using a reflector panel or a second head. We chose to use the reflector. But now let's add a little bit more interest to our photograph by adding a hair light. A hair light needs to be controlled very carefully. One of the best control accessories is the snoot. Fitted to the front of the head, it concentrates the light into a small area. Okay, so we've set up our hair light. This will give fantastic depth and three-dimensionality to our photograph. Look at the way the light falls across the side of Laura's head, but be aware it will pick up any stray hairs. Now we need to take a light reading and balance the lights. You've got to be very careful not to overdo this light. If you have too much, it will really burn out in this area. We can check this with a flash meter. By placing the flash meter in the area and pointing it towards the snoot, we can take a reading, and this is giving me between 8 and 11, half a stop more, which works very well for most people. Let's have a look at the finished result. That really makes a terrific difference. Just look at the separation between Laura and the background, and it really brings out the colour and texture of her hair. Starting from our basic lighting position, the snoot is placed behind Laura's head, set at a high level, to light the top and side of Laura's hair. The power is set to half a stop more than the front light. Let's look at the difference the snoot makes. The alternative control accessory is the honeycomb grid. The honeycomb grid will only allow light to pass through it in a parallel beam. It's fitted to the front of the unit like this and gives a lovely soft-edged pool of light. Let's see the effect as a background light. Okay, so we've put our honeycomb grid into position, pointing towards the bottom of the background. Let's turn the main light off so we can really see what's going on. It gives a lovely graduated effect on the background. Let's see what that looks like. Wow, just look at that. That really does add depth to the picture. With our main light and reflector panel still in the same position, we can add a second head fitted with our honeycomb grid pointing towards the bottom of the background. Again, set at about half a stop more to give that lovely graduated effect. Okay, so what can we do with this system? We've kept the background the same, but this time we're going to use two lights at the front. Previously we used one light and a reflector. Now we're going to use a main light fitted with a silver umbrella and a fill light fitted with a translucent umbrella. We're going to adjust them so that there's one f-stop difference between the main and the fill. We've already set the lights. Let me show you how I metered it. Firstly, we're going to turn the fill light off. We're going to take a meter reading from the main light from this position and that's giving me f8. Secondly, we're going to put the fill light back on and turn the main light off. I'm going to take a reading from this position just from the fill light. That's giving me f5.6, 1 stop less. Now we're going to turn the main light back on and take a light reading from this position with the meter pointing directly at the camera so that it takes a reading from